to now highlight these cases. The first case that really caught the public attention, of course, was Rodney King. That's been over 23 years ago. But if there's no camera there to capture what happens, it's only the police's version. You know, they train cops. If it's going to be a confrontation, make sure you're the only one around to tell the story. They take officers, they put them through a training program, and then when they hit the streets, another officer says, well, let us tell you how this really goes out here in the street. What we need are, in minority communities, and I'll give you an example. I'm a farmer by profession. I have a vineyard right across from my house. So most people out working in their yard maybe a half hour a day cutting their grass. I'm out there from like these days, this time of year, I'm out there 6, 8, 10 hours a day. And I started this in 2010. I know most of the black cops that wave, how you doing? The white cops I wave, they turn their head like I smack them. Like I spit at them. How you doing, officer? Turn their head, don't speak to them. You're in my community. I'm tending my vineyard, and you don't even want to speak to me? That means you're an army of occupation. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be patrolling my community if that's how you feel about me. I told Calvin Williams, who was the district commander, he said, I'll make him speak to you. I said, no, I don't want you to I don't need no more friends. I need an officer that wants to be not driving through my community with a skull cap pulled down, dark glasses, and black driving gloves looking like a thug. I don't want you in my community. But that's where they want to be. The officer that shot Tamir Rice, and what should have happened with Tamir Rice was real simple. If community policing was in place like it should have been, the officer would have got out the car and said, hey, Tamir, what are you doing? Come here. He would have known the kid. That's how community policing. There ain't but so many teenage kids in any community. Every cop should know every kid in the community. So when one of the kids start acting up, hey, come here, what the hell are you doing? But Steve Loomis said, our guys don't like community policing. Some of our guys don't believe in community policing. No, because they want to be cowboys. The officer that shot Tamir Rice, his father, who was a cop for 20 years in New York City, said, my son wanted to be where the action is. I want to get that light flying. I want to drive through communities at 100 miles an hour. I want to get that testosterone going. I want excitement. I want thrills. And I don't care if I wreck my car or call somebody else. They're not in the business of trying to keep the peace. They're in the excitement business. We need more women, less testosterone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Frazier. Councilman Simperman, I offered you a 5-minute rebuttal, which you might want to take.
I'd actually, why don't we let people ask questions?
Okay.
Because that's more important than me talking.
Okay, well, thank you. I think we have some. Yes, would you come up?
I want to thank the group for a very, very interesting presentation. My question is that two things. One is the city's lack of reaction. Tamir Rice's family sued the city. And what the city has done is the first response was using a kind of Latin word, kind of decadent, which was a way of referring to Tamir Rice. But as I understand it, what the city has done is tried to defend the police department. They've actually implicitly blamed Tamir. And so what's happened is, I'd like to get a response to that because I find that baffling. I find it morally really, really objectionable that instead of the city saying, look, we made a mistake, instead of the mayor saying, one of the people under my jurisdiction, if you will, is made a mistake. Instead, the city is fighting the suit. And they're implicitly, and there are some legal aspects of it, but they are implicitly, if you read the Northeast Ohio coverage, they're implicitly, if I read it, are putting the blame on Tamir. I find that absolutely astounding. And I think that that cries out for two things. One, I think it cries out for some kind of answer. And secondly, I think, and maybe Riley could address that, to talk about why Northeast Ohio regulators have some great coverage, why there hasn't been more coverage of that particular issue.
Okay.
So, your first question first. A little history, and I'm just going to be really candid with you. The first executive action that Mayor Jackson took when he was elected was to revise the use of deadly force. That came as a direct result of incidences that occurred with Brendan McLeod, a young man who was in a closet. I believe, I don't know if if he was ever found to have anything on him, but he had a knife. He was killed in his home, and it happened in a way that I believe that was when the Department of Justice first came in. So Mayor Jackson's first thing that he did as mayor was to revise the use of deadly force. And there were a few years in the mayor's first term where that really stuck. And I think it sent a message that there was accountability. I think a lot of my constituents who were African American felt that the mayor had their back and he was looking out to make sure that the rules were a little bit more clear. The system is set up for confrontation. The family of Tamir Rice has constitutional rights and I would say obligations to pursue what they're pursuing right now in court. I'm not going to get into it. I don't know what the litigation's going on. I can tell you that I think you used the word immoral about the response. I've known Mayor Jackson for a long time. It's hard to apologize. He apologized to the family for the language and the response of the lawsuit. Some of my constituents have said he should have settled right then and there. And I don't speak for the mayor, I don't speak for the law department, but I can tell you that the sentiment that this is just another case, which is what you do when you have just another response, and it seemed more formulaic than it did, like a lot of thought went into it, was something where the mayor had a press conference and he basically apologized to the family. God bless Tamir Rice's family. His mother accepted the apology. Litigation will continue, and I can share this with you as well. There is a growing sense of this, and I think Riley did a great job of this with regard to journalism. The mayor has fired police officers that he feels have violated civil and constitutional rights. Every one of them has gotten their job back with back pay. So, oh yeah, and I can tell you name after name after name. I can tell you officers that I'm aware of who the mayor fired for dereliction of duty, and our beloved court system thought enough of those officers to reinstate them and penalize the city with interest to get them back. We have a problem. I have a problem. I'm a council person on the safety committee. I have a problem. We have a problem. If our judiciary continues to enforce behavior that even the mayor, regarding all the litigation that he's going to get, is undone because some judge says, well, it's this or it's that, it's something that I'm grateful Northeast Ohio Media Group pointed out of all the times that the mayor has acted, and to his dismay and the dismay of a lot of residents, his executive actions were undone.
Could I speak to that for a second?
Sure.
Shakespeare said, first let's kill all the lawyers. Didn't he? And you're not a lawyer yet.
It's gonna be a good
We'll
lawyer.
spare you. But
It's gonna be a good
the
lawyer.
councilman is right. It's a confrontational. City officials and the mayor has to conserve public funds. That's their job. So they have to say, we're going to fight this out in court. We have to blame the victim so that we don't wind up paying more money than we might have paid. And that puts them in a terrible bind. And as to what the councilman said about the legal system, these federal mediators, these federal arbitrators think nothing of giving a cop his job back, because there's a great book by a Harvard law professor, his name was William J. Stuntz. He died much too early at age 50. The book's about 4 years old. It's called The Collapse of American Criminal Justice. If you really want to know what the problem is, read The Collapse of American Criminal Justice. It's an amazing book. Supreme Court Justice Elaine Kagan said he's the brightest legal mind, and I refer to it constantly. We have a broken criminal justice system in this country, and it's been broken for years. But since it doesn't affect the majority of people, we've taken the system and turned it on its head. We've never really had a fair criminal justice system when it concerns minorities. And I'm talking about going back to the founding of the Republic, when the founding fathers refused to address the issue of slavery. They danced around it. And then after the Emancipation Proclamation, you know, we didn't have prisons in the United States until slavery was over. And so what we had to do, now you got all these free black men, so we better demonize them. If we can't own you, then we better demonize you. And that's exactly what the system set about doing. And if we demonize you, then that makes you outside the law, that makes you outlaws to begin with. And the real story that cops tell each other, that the cops tell the public, and that's why cases like Rodney King, where clearly the man was beaten and the jury found him innocent, like Eric Garner, where clearly the man was choked in a chokehold, the jury refused to indict, because police officers tell America, you better let us handle that black horde the way we know how, or they will break in your house, they will cut your throat, rape your wife, and kill your kids. So you better let us put our foot on their neck the way we know how to protect you white folks. And America said, oh, you put it that way? Hell, beat them up. That's been our response. That's the story they've been telling since emancipation. And the story still holds true, unfortunately.
We're just gonna let Riley answer Dr. Perloff's question from back there, which was about media coverage, right? So you asked a second question.
Yeah, I first of all wanted to say that when I read through the lawsuit that Tamir Rice's family filed, I was almost astounded. It was the same exact boilerplate language that we saw when we looked at the 60-some other lawsuits, where they say any injury from the defendant was as a result of his or her own actions. And that was their response to, you know, in a lawsuit you have the accusation and then the response. It was people who said, you know, this officer did a lot of the things like what he described, or senselessly shot someone, or just completely escalated a situation beyond belief. And their response was that it was the defendants, it was a result of their own actions. So it was, I think it's just sort of like he was saying, it's their response to every lawsuit. You know, that's just kind of boilerplate language, and they were not sensitive to the severity of, obviously, the Tamir Rice case. And the mayor did apologize, which I think is definitely important to note. So,
There was another question.
Chris, your talk was very moving, and I know it's very emotional for you, but I think it's important for you to tell that story and be on other panels and discuss it, because what it shows is that it doesn't only happen to black people. It's not only black people who are affected. And I think the media, of course, now is focusing on African Americans, and because there have been a number of these terrible things happen. But it can happen to white people, as you are. And to tell your story, I think, is very important. My son was a police officer for about 10 years. He's now a lawyer, became a lawyer. But the advice he told me is, if you're ever stopped by the police, do not contradict them, do not argue with them, just listen to them and do what they tell you. And he was trying to tell me what the effect is. But I had a college professor, not in this school, And he said, you know, as a student, you should try to do work that you like and try to get paid for that work. And if you like to kill people, there are two things you can do. You can join the military, you can join the army, or you can join the police force. And that way you can kill people and not be blamed. And that's what a college professor told me.
Eileen?
What I'm hearing from pretty much everybody here on the panel is that two very important parts of the justice system are broken. One is the criminal justice system part, and one is the legal justice system part. I'm the person who clapped when you said kill all the lawyers, because that's what I was thinking as I heard everybody here. I'm not hearing police talking when I'm hearing what the reports say. I'm hearing lawyers talk. So to me, that's just a comment.
I
It's
just
an
wanted to,
adversarial system that sort of sets people against one another, isn't it?
I just wanted to respond to this man's comment. The Department of Justice report, they actually didn't even delve into the issue of race, like that wasn't part of the actual investigation. But despite that, they still made a note in there saying that there was absolutely an issue of racism within the police department, within mostly white officers inflicting violence on black victims. And in most of the lawsuits that most of the lawsuits that we went over, it was overwhelmingly white cops and black victims. So that isn't something that is just is made up. I mean, it's a very important issue, and I'm not sure exactly why the Department of Justice didn't focus more on that exact issue, but they pointed it out despite the fact that it wasn't part of their investigation. So.
I also want to make a few comments. With you, Miss, I appreciate those comments. In law school, they teach us that, the lawyers get a terrible rap. There are a lot of bad lawyers out there, and we know that. So it's actually at the forefront of our curriculum to teach people to, we're here to help people and not to do what you're saying is happening. Because that happens. You get overcome with the money, and then, it's hard for lawyers to find jobs now, so they just do whatever they can to make money. So I agree with your comments, and I appreciate those comments. And sir, I want to elaborate on what you were saying. I appreciate those comments, but at the same time, I appreciate what you were saying, but I am of biracial background. My father is a black Cuban, and my mother's a white lady from Spain. So, in Caribbean countries, slave ships went to Caribbean countries just like they did to the U.S. So there's black Cubans, black Puerto Ricans, black, Jamaicans are Caribbean black people. Just so my father is one of those. I am a biracial background. I think it's important to say, yes, it does happen to people of lighter complexions and white people, but I think that when a police officer approaches me, he doesn't see this gentleman in the white button down here with the jeans. He sees a minority. I think we need to be clear about that. He doesn't see a white person. I think it's definitely clear that he sees someone who's a minority, and the way, dressed today, me button down, pants with the Jordans on, he's like, hey, this kid, I'm sure at the forefront of his mind is, hey, this kid's a third-year law student. I just wanted to kind of, respond by saying that.
I can add one comment. Officers, one of their first excuses is, hey, this is a dangerous job and we have to do this. And I will submit, every police officer has the right to go home safe to his family at the end of his shift. That's a right. He should do everything possible to make sure he goes home safe at the end of his shift. So that's why they said we have to shoot people sometimes to go home safe. But black officers patrol the same streets as white officers, but they don't fire their guns nearly as much. Why is that? And then they'll say, oh, it's just because we have to do it, we don't mean to. In Oxnard, California, there's a story, I think it was Oxnard, but this is a story that was repeated in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Officers, when they shoot somebody, they can get a tattoo on their left shoulder of a gun. And if they kill them, smoke can be coming out of the gun. To your point that this is a job that allows you to be a killer. And they had 9 officers in this city in California that had these tattoos. They were so proud of shooting somebody, they got a tattoo. So that gives the lie to the fact that, oh, we're just doing it so we can go home safe. And if they, and I tell any cop, if the job is that dangerous and you're that afraid, go get another job.
Real quick, Dr. Buchanan, I just want to say 2 things on those points. There were a lot of interesting things that happened during the listening tours that council did, and having to keep your mouth shut and take notes and listen is good practice for everyone, especially people in politics. But the fascinating thing was, as the community was venting and rightfully talking about the issues that were causing a lot of pain, every one of the meetings that we had police officers there. And they were there, I'm assuming, to make sure that things, because people were being very intense and intentional, didn't get out of hand. And I kept watching the young police officers who were listening to the people speaking, and they were all nodding their heads. African American police officers, Spanish speaking police officers, white police officers, men, women, they were young. And I kept thinking to myself, you get it. You're here, you're listening. In some cases, you could see police officers maybe having a question about it. And at the end of every one of those meetings, at the end of every one, they had to kick everybody out because there was such a truth-letting that people wanted to sit and talk to each other. I'm talking about people who were there, self-identified as members of the Cleveland Communist Party, with that same police officer in full uniform, having a meaningful dialogue and a conversation. And I kept thinking, how does this happen? How does this happen 24 hours a day now? How do we make this happen?
Exactly.
The other interesting thing to Riley's profession, to the room here, one of the more interesting stories I think that kind of got kicked to the side because of everything that's going on is a story that was done by Nick Castell from WCPN. And if you go back to the reels, the files, the tapes, whatever, he did a story about how suburban cities around Cleveland recruit minority police officers. I don't know if you guys remember this. And I'm not going to name the 2 cities, but you know them. And the one chief of the police officer of the department who has a city that is almost 50% African American and has had racial issues, big ones, like churches getting blocked for zoning because they were African American issues. Nope. Basically, the chief said, well, when we want to recruit African American police officers, there's a church in the community, we put up a flyer in the back of the church 2 weeks before we're hiring, we let people know. And Tony Ganser was the reporter who was